Hello, all. Today I'll be telling you about my paper entitled Operation Undermine Strategic Threats to the US led International Space Order Originating from China, Carving an Alternative Sphere of Influence. Now, to begin, I'll explain a little bit about what I mean by the International Space Order. That is the comprehensive set of laws and norms and international treaties that regulate international action in the space environment. There are an actually small number of treaties. There's really only one comprehensive treaty, the 1967 International Space Treaty. And what's important to understand is that right now there is a lack of international will to develop a new international treaty. Yet there is also a pressing need to do exactly that. With the advent of reusable rockets, microsats, and the growing number of actors in space, it is becoming all the more apparent that we need a new set of comprehensive norms and regulations. Now, in the absence of international will, the current plan has been to harmonize across international boundaries the domestic laws and regulations regarding action in space, thus achieving the same goal as having an international treaty. However, right now, what we're seeing is that the Chinese Communist Party intend to undermine that existing international framework of normative and legislative harmonization of national space laws by leading a multifocal incentive campaign directed at the Belt and Road Initiative partners and others, intended to carve out a separate sphere of influence competing with the US led international order. Now, the threat of this is not simply just to US national security, but also to the common space environment. There is only one low Earth orbit, and there's only one set of geostationary Earth orbits. And as more states enter this field, and as China seeks to carve out a separate sphere of influence, the degradations of norms and procedures in space, as well as management and the possibility of the increasing securitization of space, lead to the possibility of the real threat, which is the Kessler syndrome. And that is the cascading effect of satellites' debris once one explodes, hitting another satellite, thus creating a chain of more debris, hitting further satellites all at tens of thousands of miles an hour, basically wiping out the existing infrastructure in space and sending us to the Stone Age. So to understand a little bit about why China is carving out or wants to carve out a separate sphere of influence, we have to go a little bit into the Chinese doctrine. So firstly, in 2015, the CCP designated space as an official military domain. They put it under the branch of the People's Liberation Army as part of a wider modernization and reorganization effort designed at creating a modern army. Their new form of warfare that they refer to as informatized warfare is primarily focused on blinding and deafening an advanced enemy using cyber tools, propaganda, disinformation, and other means, and thereby, as well as their own existing and upcoming infrastructure, to obtain information dominance in the field of battle. Secondly, in 2013, Xi Jinping announced his Chinese Dream Plan, which intends to create or develop the China as the innovation powerhouse of the world. Not an innovation, but the innovation powerhouse, thereby unseating the United States. They believe that we have been able to maintain our dominance by being the leaders of innovation and leading from the front. And they seek to achieve just that over the next 30 years. We could dive a little bit into the anti-satellite capabilities and other military threats posed and the multi-generational gap that is closing between US and Chinese technologies. However, that is not the primary focus of the paper. We're going to dive more into the challenges to the existing structure of space management and legislation. Those ways in which China seeks to create its own sphere of influence and challenge the existing order come through a couple of different means. There is the Chinese National Space Station, which they have refused to make a multinational endeavor. The idea is to loan out space and bring other nations in. I believe that this is going to be to pull in developing states that don't have their own infrastructure for cheap thereby pulling them into their sphere of influence. Secondly, there's the Beidou navigation satellite and communication systems, which they are making available to Belt and Road Initiative partners. There are also launch services and upcoming internet providing satellites that will likewise be provided to those Belt and Road Initiative partners. The idea is to create dependent client states from these developing nations that are pulled into China's sphere of influence, which will create leverage over those states. This is leverage China can use to achieve its regional goals and to make those states overlook sensitive issues to China. Additionally, we need to talk about the increased civil and military integration drive. This has already been a concern, but since 2013 in the Chinese Dream speech, Xi also announced that there would be a broadening of civil and military integration across the spectrum. Now, this is particularly concerning when it comes to the quote-unquote demonopolization drive of state-owned enterprises. This is supposed to increase competitiveness and theoretically reduce market concerns for working with Chinese firms. However, with that civil-military integration, that is simply chopping off the head of the Hydra to create 100 new heads. And that is as many firms as were created in 2017 in the space sector, the most recent data we have. So this is simply creating a myriad of new fronts to national security that we have to be concerned about, especially in terms of the growing private sector in space. Now, with all this in mind, we will get to my recommendations. Firstly, we should, as the national security strategy contemplated doing, we should be extending national security protections to private sector and new space firms. This is paramount to preventing China from further closing that generational gap any quicker. Secondly, we should continue with the Wolf Amendment. This is something passed in 2011. It has gone into every budget, and it says that the national government will not spend any money, i.e. to NASA, in cooperation with any missions, space-related missions with the Chinese Communist Party. So we should be rigorously enforcing the Wolf Amendment, and we should be cautious about plans to deregulate the private sector, as long as that deregulation only focuses on sourcing of equipment and the streamlining of the contracting process, which is an existing issue in the domestic space development sector. We should be fine. But deregulation should not be allowing firms to expand their work with Chinese firms or further partner with Chinese academic institutions. This is a huge concern because of the fact that lots of intellectual technological property is stolen through cyber, physical, and academic espionage. So the third and final recommendation I have is to retool perhaps some of the existing U.S. missions, such as perhaps the Lunar Gateway program, to be multinational missions so that we can bring other states that could be pulled into the Chinese sphere of influence back into our existing sphere of influence. Thank you.